Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. So there was a question that was recently posed to a representative of the traditionalist viewpoint. And the question was, is it true that early Shia scholars regarded those who believe that the Imams have knowledge of everything and all supernatural powers? Did the early scholars consider those who had such beliefs to be from the ghulat, which is the plural of ghali, a person who subscribes to the ideology of ghulu, which is ideological and doctrinal extremism? So this is a simple yes or no question, but the problem is when you pose this to someone who is a traditionalist and has a traditionalist bent of mind, this is actually a very embarrassing question for someone who subscribes to the traditional ideology. Because, if you ask the question, if you phrase it this way, what do today's scholars say about this? It's much easier to save face. But when you ask a traditional Shia Maulvi, what did your earlier antecedents and predecessors, the founders of the Shia madhab, the pioneers, the people in whose time Shia belief and faith and identity really crystallized, the people in the formative period, the scholars in the formative period, what was their view and their stance on this issue? It's a very embarrassing question for a person who holds the traditionalist point of view. Because you can see that from the responses that they give. This is a simple yes or no question. Did the early Shia scholars regard the belief that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb to be ghulu or not? Simple yes or no. Either you say yes, they considered it to be ghulu, or you say no, they didn't consider it to be ghulu. But the reason why, in response to this question, you find the traditionalists having to go off into so many different tangents, redefining ghulu, and then basically going here and there, straying and diverting and deviating here and there. Reason why they have to do all of that is because they know and they realize that a massive cover-up and fraud has been perpetrated against the masses on this issue, on this particular issue itself, the issue of whether Imams have Ilmul Ghayb or not. And because they know that there has been a cover-up and a fraud has been perpetrated, no traditional scholar would like to give you a simple yes or no answer to this difficult and embarrassing question. Embarrassing because those scholars who believe that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb today have actually gone against the ijma', the unanimous consensus of the early and classical Shia scholars, as we have already shown you in previous lectures and as we are happy to show you again in this segment. So yes, this is the biggest and most critical fact that today's traditional Maulvis will hide from you. They want to conveniently brush it and sweep it under the carpet. What fact? The fact that the early Shia scholars had ijma' on the belief that Imams don't have Ilmul Ghayb. And if you're a serious seeker of knowledge and student, don't take my word for it or the word of some traditional Maulana or resident alim from here or there who's living in the 21st century, so many centuries removed from the early scholars. If you want to know the position of the early scholars, go to the early scholars themselves. So how do we go to them? Go to their books. Their books have survived. So don't take the word of contemporary scholars and researchers. Go to the early books of these classical scholars. Those books are freely available today, and see what they say. And go and read the book of someone who is actually a representative of the classical scholars, who's actually one of them. So go, for example, and read the Risala entitled Al-Masail Al-Ukbariyya by Sheikh Al-Mufid, who died in 413 AH. So he's a scholar from the early 5th century. 4th century, second half of the 4th century, and the first half of the, or rather the first decade of the 5th century, when he's asked the question about Ilmul Ghayb. So the questioner assumes, and he has this misconception that Imams having knowledge of what is to come is agreed upon. Because you see, around this time, even in the early period, the Ghulat had been spreading their propaganda. By the 4th and 5th century, the Ghulat had become very active. They started during the time of Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, and they spread and they reproduced like anything. And they started growing. So by this time, by the early 5th century, Ghulu has already become quite well established, and it's getting to the people. The masses are being affected by it. And that's why you have questions coming to someone like Shaykh al-Mufid. And the question is saying, well, al-imamu indana mujma'un ala annahu ya'lamu ma yakun. Are we not all agreed on the fact that Imam knows what's going to happen in the future? And then based on this assumption, he proceeds to ask him other questions, which is then, if that is the case, then how come Amirul Mu'mineen went to the masjid knowing full well that he would be struck? Or why did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam go to Kufa when he knew that they would, betray him? So he asks all of these questions, and the response that comes from Shaykh al-Mufid, this is the classical scholar, the early Shia scholar, he says, وَأَمَّا الْجَوَابُ عَنْ قَوْلِهِ إِنَّ الْإِمَامَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يَكُونُ. As for our response to your claim that the Imam knows everything that's going to happen by virtue of the fact that he has Ilmul Ghayb, so he knows what's coming, he knows what's going to happen in the future. فَإِجْمَاعُنَا أَنَّ الْأَمْرَ عَلَى خِلَافِ مَا قَالَ. He says, we have a news flash for you. Our ijma' is أَنَّ الْأَمْرَ عَلَى خِلَافِ مَا قَالَ. Our ijma' is the opposite of what you are talking about and what you are claiming. You are saying that, is it not agreed upon? It is agreed upon that the Imam knows what's going to happen in the future. He says, no. Who told you this? You've been brainwashed by the Ghulat, it seems. The mainstream position of the classical early Shia scholars is that no, they don't have Ilmul Ghayb, and they have ijma' on this. Shaykh al-Mufid is claiming that the early classical scholars, that is his contemporaries and those before him, they had ijma', they had unanimous consensus on this matter, that the Imam does not have Ilmul Ghayb. وَمَا أَجْمَعَتِ الشِّيعَةُ قَطٌّ عَلَى هَذَا الْقَوْلِ. He tells the questioner, what you are mentioning about the Imam knowing what's going to happen in the future, he says the Shia never had ijma' on this. In fact, إِجْمَاعُنَا أَنَّ الْأَمْرَ عَلَى خِلَافِ مَا قَالَ. Our ijma' is the opposite of this. So that's the statement and the verdict of Shaykh al-Mufid, this great scholar from the 5th century. And he is saying, so don't take my word for it. Don't take the word of a traditional scholar from the 21st century. Take the opinion of Shaykh al-Mufid. Shaykh al-Mufid is telling you that in our time, in his time, and the time before him, the ijma' is what? The ijma' is that the Imams don't have Ilmul Ghayb. It's the opposite of what this questioner is posing to him. This is where, in Al-Masail al-Ukbariyah, which has been published as a separate risala, pages 69 to 72, Al-Allama al-Majlisi has produced this risala in Bihar al-Anwar as well. So those of you who have Bihar can find it in Bihar itself. And not only this, rather, if you go, it's not just that Shaykh al-Mufid is saying that our ijma' is that Imams don't have Ilmul Ghayb. It doesn't just, the story doesn't end here. The classical and early Shia scholars, even prior to the time of Shaykh al-Mufid, like for example, a Shaykh Abu Ja'far, Muhammad ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Qiba al-Razi. This is a great early classical Shia scholar. He is credited with really being one of the greatest defenders of Shi'ism at a time when Shi'ism was being attacked by rival sects, by the Zaydiyya and the Ja'fariyya and these other sects. They're attacking the Shia Ithna Asharis. So who steps forward to defend the Shia Ithna Asharis? Shaykh Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi. Look at what he says. Shaykh al-Saduq reproduces his statements. We've shared all of this material before. We don't mind repeating it. As many times as people will create confusion, we don't mind setting the record straight. If you don't have Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah by Shaykh al-Saduq, in which he has reproduced the writings of Sheikh Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, or if you don't know Arabic, although Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah has been translated into English. It's available on islam.org for those of you who would like to access it in English. But if that is difficult for you, a book that is quite easily accessible and can be bought online very easily is this book, Crisis and Consolidation in the Formative Period of Shiite Islam. Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi and his contribution to Imamite Shiite thought by Professor Hussein Mudarrisi of Princeton. So this is an academic work. What he has done at the end of this book, it's a very useful book. We'd recommend all those who are interested in understanding the evolution and development of Shiaism to read this book. It's not that fat and it's not multi-volume. Okay? It's a book in 280 pages if you include the index. Very easy to read, very easy to access. Towards the end of this book, what he has done is he has actually given you essays and writings of Ibn Qiba al-Razi, who is a prominent Shia theologian from the 4th century. And in this book, you will see, read the writings of Ibn Qiba al-Razi. If you want to know what the early Shia scholars believed, there's no point asking the traditional scholars of today. These scholars or these Maulanas, they don't have an interest in letting you know what the early Shias believed in. Either they don't know what the early Shias believed in, some of them are ignorant, or those who are not ignorant, who know, they don't have any interest in sharing this research with you. Because this research will really undermine what they want to promote. They want to promote the kind of ghulu that they want to promote is obviously condemned in the early period. So that's why they will not share with you those statements coming from the authorities of the past which condemn and denounce these beliefs. But in any case, if you look at what Ibn Qiba al-Razi, for example, writes in this book, and Shaykh al-Saduq promotes this statement massively in Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah, this is his position as well. Shaykh al-Saduq and all the classical scholars, this is what they believe in. He says very clearly that وَمَا كَانَ غَيْرَ هَذَا. So he lays out the belief of the classical early Shia, the authentic Shia belief. And then he says, وَمَا كَانَ غَيْرَ هَذَا. What is apart from this? فَهُوَ قَوْلُ الْمُغِيرِيَّةِ. What goes against what we have stated here is the statement, it's the claim of the Mughiriyya. The Mughiriyya are a sect of the Ghulat who follow the ringleader of the Ghulat who was called Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id. وَمَنْ يَنْحَلُ لِلْأَئِمَّةِ عِلْمَ الْغَيْبِ. He says those are the people who attribute Ilmul Ghayb, knowledge of the unseen, to the Imams. He says فَهَذَا كُفْرٌ بِاللَّهِ وَخُرُوجٌ عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ عِنْدَنَا. He says this is clear kufr, this is clear denial and rejection of Allah. وَخُرُوجٌ عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ عِنْدَنَا. To make a claim that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb or that Allah has given Imams Ilmul Ghayb, he says you leave the fold of Islam as far as we are concerned, the classical Shia scholars, if you make a claim like this. Where is this mentioned? Shaykh al-Saduq in Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah, page 106 of the standard edition. You find the statement there, that whoever claims that Imams of Ahlul Bayt have Ilmul Ghayb, first of all, he identifies for you, where is this claim coming from? Who gave the Imams Ilmul Ghayb? Was it a gift from Allah? He says, no, this is kufr billah. To claim that Allah has given them this gift is kufr, and I'll explain why these people believed it was kufr. But the important thing is they're saying that we don't believe this. Who came up with this claim? Did Allah say that He has gifted this to the Ahlul Bayt? Did the Imams claim it? Did the Prophet claim it? No. As Shaykh Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi has clarified, this is the claim of the Mughiriyya, a subsect of the Ghulat who were blind followers of Mughira ibn Sa'id, who was a ringleader of the Ghulat, who, if you go into the books of Rijal, you find the Imams have cursed him and disassociated themselves from him. So this is where you're getting this claim from. And the early Shia scholars, they're setting the record straight. They're saying, we have never said this. And we consider this to be an act of disbelief in Allah, kufr in Allah, and departure from Islam. Ya akhi, your flight has departed from Islam if you end up believing or promoting this claim. And this is not the only statement. Throughout this, because you see, he issues this statement in response to attacks from Zaydis and other rival sects who are saying that you people, you have deviant beliefs, you Isna Asharis, you have deviant beliefs. Why? Because the Ghulat were also posing, they were also claiming to be followers of the Imams. So they got confused. People started thinking that this is the belief of at least the rival sects. They started thinking that the Shia Isna Asharis believe in this. So they attack the Shia Isna Asharis and they say, the Qur'an is so clear, your own Imams are so clear, but you people don't believe. You people are claiming they have Ilmul Ghayb. When the Imams have denied this, Allah has denied this, the Qur'an has denied this, what's wrong with you? And so the representative of the Isna Asharis, Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, he comes forward and he says, Baba, this is lies against us. We have never claimed Ilmul Ghayb. In fact, we do takfir of those who claim Ilmul Ghayb for the Imams. So let's be very clear. This is the claim of the Mughiriyah, a subsect of the Ghulat. Don't attribute the claims and beliefs of the Ghulat to us. We've got nothing to do with them. Our Imams have disassociated from them, and we also disassociate from them. We do takfir. What more do you want? We have removed them from the fold of Islam. What more do you want from us? So the classical scholars, the early Shia scholars are very clear that belief that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb is not only ghulu, it is kufr and khuruj anil Islam. So you can disagree with them and say this is a very harsh verdict and this and that, and well, you know, if people are doing ta'weel and they're bringing narrations and this, you shouldn't, do takfir. The most you can say is that, which is our position, we don't do takfir of those who claim Ilmul Ghayb for the Imams. Rather, we simply warn them and tell them that this is ghulu, and this is basically going against what Allah has revealed in the Qur'an and what the Prophet and Imams taught. And you are in error basically if you claim something like this. This is ghulu, and yes, it is iftira as well. If you claim Allah has gifted them, and Allah is clearly saying in the Quran that I have not given them, and in fact He's instructing the Prophet in chapter 6 verse 50 to explicitly tell the people that wala a'lamul ghayb, I don't have knowledge of ghayb, nor have I been given knowledge of ghayb. So yeah, you're doing iftira against Allah, for which the punishment is very severe. Allah in the Quran repeatedly in 9 places, as we mentioned in the series, 9 places Allah says, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنِ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. Who can be a greater zalim than a person who attributes or ascribes false claims to Allah? So this is no minor sin. It's a major sin. But like all major sins, it doesn't remove you from the fold of Islam. You still remain within the fold of Islam. You're still a Muslim, you're still a mu'min, but you are someone who is guilty of iftira. And the punishment for iftira is hell. So yeah, Allah has never taken any guarantee that a person who has iman and who has faith and who is a Muslim cannot go to hell. No, if you disobey Allah and you commit acts of zulm, you can still end up in hell. So yeah, there is no immunity that Allah has offered any Muslim or mu'min that you can never go to the fire of hell. No, if you commit iftira against Allah, the Quran is very clear, you end up in hell. So the other statement I want to share with you from Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, which is representative of the position of the early Shia scholars, is this statement over here in response to the claims that are being made against the Imams of Ahlul Bayt themselves. That why did the Imams of Ahlul Bayt not refute each and every single of the khurafat that the Ghulat fabricated and attributed to them? So Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, this is his response. He says, وَالْإِمَامُ أيضا لم يقف على كل هذه التخاليط التي رويت لأنه لا يعلم الغيب. He says the Imam, how do you expect him to refute all of those fabrications? Because the Imams, they refuted some fabrications, but not every fabrication of the Ghulat, the Imams were able to refute it. So some people then use this against the Imams. They say, why did the Imams not refute each and every single fabrication of the Ghulat? So Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, this 12er Shia scholar of the early period, he's defending the Imams. He's saying, how can the Imam refute it? Well, Imam أيضا لم يقف على كل هذه التخاليط التي رويت. The Imam was not aware of all these confusing and contradictory claims that were transmitted in his name by the narrators of hadith. لأنه لا يعلم الغيب, because the Imam does not have knowledge of the unseen. He does not have Ilmul Ghayb. So, Ya Aba Ja'far ibn Qiba, if the Imam doesn't have Ilmul Ghayb, then what is your belief about him? So he lays it out. He says, وَإِنَّمَا, listen to this. This is the early classical Shia position. He says, وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ عَبْدٌ صَالِحٌ يَعْلَمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالسُّنَّةِ. He says the Imam is only a righteous slave of Allah who has knowledge of the book and Sunnah. وَيَعْلَمُ مِنْ أَخْبَارِ شِيعَتِهِ مَا يُنْهَى إِلَيْهِ. And as far as the akhbar and the reports of his Shia are concerned, he doesn't have all of them. Rather, he only knows those of the reports of his Shia which are made to reach him, which are sent to him. So when people report to the Imam that so and so Shia is saying this about you, so and so narrator is claiming this about you, that's when the Imam finds out about it. It's not that Allah has given him Ilmul Ghayb that he can access and know what everyone is claiming and saying. So that's Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba's argument. He says what the Imam did not even know half of the claims that were being made about him. They didn't even know half of the ahadith that were being circulated in their name. And so if they didn't know them, how do you expect the Imam to respond to them? He can't respond to something he doesn't know. So notice what is coming out so clearly from this response of Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi. Is that first of all, لِأَنَّهُ لَا يَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبِ. The Imam does not have knowledge of Ghayb. He does not even know the confusing and contradictory narrations, many of the narrations which are being attributed to him. He doesn't know of them. Some of them he knows because he has been informed of them. The ones he has not been informed about, he has no knowledge of them. Because he only knows the Kitab and the Sunnah, and he only knows those of the reports of the Shi'as which are being communicated and which are being brought to him. This is again Kamaluddin wa Tamammun Ni'mah by Shaykh al-Saduq, page 110. The statement is there. You can't pull wool over people's eyes today, especially not in this 21st century when all of these resources are so widely and freely accessible to people, to lay people, let alone scholars and researchers. And then finally, one statement that I would like to conclude with, in as far as the discussion about Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi is concerned, is because the Zaydi author whom he's refuting, he keeps on coming back, he keeps on trying to use this against the Shia Ithna Asharis. He says, you people, you are deviant because you are claiming that your Imams have Ilmul Ghayb. And Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, for endlessly he keeps on repeating. He says, Baba, this is not us. Why are you confusing us with the Ghulat? And the Mughir, even the Ghulat, they have a subsect that specializes in making this claim that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb. The subsect is called the Mughiriyya sect. So why are you attributing their claim to us? So that's why finally you can see the frustration is very clear in this statement by Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi when he says, قَدْ أَكْثَرْتَ فِي ذِكْرِ عِلْمِ الْغَيْبِ. You, he's telling the author whom he's refuting, you have obsessively and excessively made mention of Ilmul Ghayb. You keep on accusing us of Ilmul Ghayb. Ilmul Ghayb, we attribute Ilmul Ghayb to Imams. You keep saying that. He says, for the last time I'm telling you, وَالْغَيْبُ لَا يَعْلَمُهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Let's be very clear about this. Ghayb, the knowledge of the unseen, no one has it except for Allah. وَمَا ادَّعَاهُ لِبَشَرٍ إِلَّا مُشْرِكٌ كَافِرٌ. And no one claims it for any human being. And prophets and Imams are human beings. They're not superhuman or non-human entities. So he says, وَمَا ادَّعَاهُ لِبَشَرٍ إِلَّا مُشْرِكٌ كَافِرٌ. No one claims Ilmul Ghayb for a human being except someone who is a mushrik and a kafir. So imagine, he labels. So where and this is Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi, my friend. He's born centuries before Ibn Abdul Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah. So you can't say, oh, he was influenced by Ibn Abdul Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah and all those people. This is another sect. We're talking about the early Shia sect. And Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi is their representative. He's one of their top scholars and theologians. And he is saying that we are telling you on the record, Ghayb, no one knows it except for Allah. And anyone who claims it for any human being, even if you say Allah has given a human being Ilmul Ghayb, he says that in our eyes, such a person is a mushrik and a kafir. So this is the actual answer, the correct and honest answer. When someone asks you the question, did the classical Shia scholars of the past consider the belief that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb to be ghulu? The answer is not only ghulu, they considered it to be shirk and kufr on top of that. But the problem is that later on, afterwards, today, many of the traditional scholars, Maulvis, Maulanas, they have fallen into this ghulu and they're actively promoting it. So when you ask them, what is the position of the classical scholars? obviously, if they tell you the full truth, if they've shared with you the statements that I've just shared with you, they get exposed. The public finds out that, oh, they're promoting something that in the past was considered to be kufr and deviation and shirk. So that's why they try to whitewash. They try to conceal. They try to go here. They pick one scholar, for example. They will pick Sheikh Saduq. Okay, Sheikh Saduq did not believe in Ilmul Ghayb, but that does not make any difference, right? Sheikh Saduq is not infallible. So, Baba, this is not about Sheikh Saduq. Why are you making it look like only Sheikh Saduq was against Imams having Ilmul Ghayb? No. This is the ijma. This is the unanimous consensus of the Shia Ithna Asharis of the 4th, 5th, 3rd century. This is their classical unanimous opinion. It's not the opinion of one single scholar that you can say that, oh, this is an isolated scholar, bicharo, he got it wrong, he was mistaken, he was too rigid in hadith, so he went astray and he got deviated. No. This is the position of all the mainstream scholars of the early classical period. So what you cannot afford to hide from the public now, in light of all the researches that have come out, is that this is the classical position. So either you say that all the ijma of the classical Shia scholars is wrong, in which case then there's no point in being, then basically if you're a Shia today, who transmitted Shiism to you? It's these people, Sheikh al-Saduq, Sheikh al-Kulayni, Sheikh al-Tusi, Sayyid Murtada, these are the Abu Ja'far ibn Qibar Razi, these are the defenders and the proponents and the pioneers of Tashayyu' in the 3rd and 4th centuries. If you are going to deny and dismiss their ijma', then what have you got left? So this is not an isolated position in the classical period. In the early period, because these people were very close to the time of the Imams, and they had seen the denials of the Imams, that's why they were very clear about this. But later on, stuff happened and things changed. So now your question, the challenge for today's Shia is, you want to believe what the people closer to the times of the Imams believed in? Because their beliefs are diametrically different to what you are being fed today from the mimbar and what you're being told and what you're being taught as part of your curriculum today. It's diametrically different. It's a heaven and earth difference, world of a difference. What you are being taught today as being correct aqidah in the past, your own scholars of your own madhab, we're not talking about a different sect here, the same madhab, the classical scholars are saying, Baba, this is not aqidah, this is kufr, this is shirk, this is ghulu, this is deviation. So now the choice is yours. You want to follow them, you want to follow these. Our solution is neither follow them, neither follow these. Imam al-Sadiq al-Islam, he promotes the idea that don't take your religion from men, from individuals, from narrators of hadith, take your religion from the established teachings of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. The established Sunnah of the Prophet, the established teachings of the Imams. Don't go by what individuals say here or there. That's why we don't promote, don't take this from us. So we don't have any hujjiyah. Hujjiyah is in the Qur'an and the established teachings of the Prophet and Imams of Ahlul Bayt. When you go there, you find a very clear conception. Inshallah, we can present you the verses where Allah makes it absolutely clear that no one has Ilmul Ghayb except Him. So the question is, and this is not just in the Quran, not just in the Sunnah, but this is the established view of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and the early Shia classical scholars. So then the question comes, many of you are troubled by this question, is how did something that was considered clear kufr and shirk, how did it get transformed into popular traditional Shia doctrine today? How come what was considered to be kufr in the past, today we are being taught that it is Ainul Iman, it is part of the Shia creed. Although this in itself is debatable, whether today it is considered to be part of the Shia creed or not. There are some scholars who promote it, and there are other Shia scholars, authentic Shia scholars, who deny this. But those who promote it will try to give you the impression that no, to be a good Shia, you must believe in this. So the question is, the belief that's being promoted as part of Aqidah today, how come it was considered to be kufr and shirk and ghulu in the past? The answer to this question is given to us by our great Imam and Master, Abu Abdullah al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, in Rijal al-Kashi, which is one of the oldest and most authoritative textbooks of Ilmul Rijal. this is where we find this narration, very important and critical narration that explains to you how what was kufr became iman. In this narration, Hisham ibn al-Hakam, one of the trustworthy students and companions of Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he narrates that I heard Imam Abu Abdullah Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam saying, كان المغيرة بن سعيد يتعمد الكذب على أبي. This is, my dear brother and sister, this is where ghulu started. He says there was a man by the name of Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id. Who is saying this? Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He's saying there was a man by the name of Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id. And this should ring a bell, because just now I was talking about Abu Ja'far ibn Qiba al-Razi. What did he say when he said the claim that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb? Whose statement, whose belief is this? He says this is not the belief of the Shia Ithna Asharis. This is the belief Qawlul Mughiriyyati. This is the statement of the Mughiriyya. So now we're getting first-hand report from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam about the founder of the Mughiriyya, who is a man called Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id. And the Mughiriyya sect or subsect is named after him. They are a sect of the Ghulat. What did this guy, Mughira ibn Sa'id, what would he do? And how did he establish ghulu within Shi'ism? So Imam al-Sadiq explains. He says, كان المغيرة بن سعيد يتعمد الكذب على أبي. Mughira ibn Sa'id used to purposely and intentionally lie against my father. Yani he used to say Imam al-Baqir has said this and this, when the reality is Imam al-Baqir has said no such thing. Not only would he lie against my father, Imam al-Sadiq says, the second thing, this is the deadly play, the deadly weapon of the Ghulat. وَيَأْخُذُ كُتُبَ أَصْحَابِهِ. He used to take the books, he used to try and obtain the books of the companions of my father, Imam al-Baqir. He used to go up to them posing as an innocent, pious, sincere Shia. He used to say, I want to learn the ulum of Al-Muhammad. Can you give me your book, please? Borrow me your book. The ashab of Imam al-Baqir, like their master, they were generous. Say, someone wants knowledge, how can we deprive or deny? They didn't know his reality. Like the Imam, they also don't have Ilmul Ghayb. They don't know this person is a corrupt agent. So they give him their books. And he says, وَكَانَ أَصْحَابُهُ الْمُسْتَتِرُونَ بِأَصْحَابِ أَبِي. He says, Mughira ibn Sa'id was not alone. Imam al-Sadiq says his companions, his gang, his teammates were also hiding among the companions of Imam al-Baqir. They were embedded in the group of Imam al-Baqir. Imam al-Baqir al-Islam had a class, a group of students, large group of students who used to come and take a hadith from him, and they would record those hadith in the books. Imam al-Sadiq says these agents were embedded within that class. And what they would do is they would يَأْخُذُونَ الْكُتُبَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ أَبِي. They would take the hadith notes from the companions of my father, فَيَدْفَعُونَهَا إِلَى الْمُغِيرَةِ. They would take those books of hadith and they would surrender them and submit them to Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id, their leader. Now look at what the Imam says. Mughira, what would he do with those books? فَكَانَ يَدُسُّ فِيهَا الْكُفْرَ وَالزَّنْدَقَ. This is the testimony of Imam al-Sadiq. Listen to it carefully. He says Mughira ibn Sa'id used to insert and inject two things in the books of hadith. Al-Kufra wa Zandaqa. Imam al-Sadiq is testifying that what Mughira ibn Sa'id used to add to the books of the companions of Imam al-Baqir was kufr. He used to add heresy and blasphemy, wa Zandaqa, anti-Islamic beliefs about the Imams. وَيُسْنِدُهَا إِلَى أَبِي. But then he would attach those anti-Islamic, that kufr and zandaqa, that blasphemy and heresy, which he would insert and inject into those books. He would add a sanad for it, إِلَى أَبِي, to my father. So that the one who gets the book and he reads the book, it appears to him that the statement is coming from whom? The statement is kufr. It is blasphemy. But to the reader of the book, it will seem like the statement is coming from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Because وَيُسْنِدُهَا إِلَى أَبِي, he used to attribute it to my father. ثُمَّ يَدْفَعُهَا إِلَى أَصْحَابِهِ. Then he would take that corrupted book, which he had edited, and then he would give it back to his companions, to his students, his gang members. فَيَأْمُرُهُمْ أَنْ يَبُثُّوهَا فِي الشِّيعَةِ. Then he would command them to circulate this book among the Shia. فكل ما كان في كتب أصحاب أبي من الغلو فذاك ما دسه المغيرة بن سعيد في كتبهم. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, all the ghulu that you find in the books of my father, that is the books of his companions in which they recorded the hadith of my father, Al-Baqir alayhi salam, all the ghulu you find there, it is ما دسه المغيرة بن سعيد في كتبهم. It is what Mughirah ibn Sa'id injected and inserted into their books. This is the testimony of Imam al-Sadiq. This is how what was kufr. So ultimately, how did this claim that Imams have Ilmul Ghayb, how did it become standard Shia doctrine or traditional Shia doctrine? How? In the early period, all the classical Shia scholars rejected it. They considered it kufr, they considered it shirk. Like the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, the Imams also considered it kufr and shirk and iftira. Most importantly, they considered it to be iftira against Allah. So then how did iftira become standard doctrine? It became standard doctrine in the Safavid period, when the Akhbaris rose to prominence. The Akhbaris, their methodology was blind reliance on akhbar, on the narrations, including the narrations of the Ghulat, which they had inserted into the books of the companions of Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq. They took those same books, the Akhbaris, they took those books and they said, well, in this book we have hadith from Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq saying we have Ilmul Ghayb. So they said, okay, if Imam is saying we have Ilmul Ghayb, we believe Imam has Ilmul Ghayb. But they disregarded the warning of Imam al-Sadiq that, Baba, the ahadith and narrations in the books of the companions of my father have been edited, they have been injected with kufr, not with low-level, low-stake false claims. He's saying the false claim that they have injected and inserted into these books, they amount to kufr and blasphemy and heresy. But the Akhbaris, they ignored this warning. They said, no, as long as it is attributed with sanad to the Imams, we will accept it, we will make it our aqidah. So the Akhbaris in the Safavid period, this is in the 15th and 16th century. So if you go by the Islamic calendar, this is the 10th and 11th century Hijri. So in the 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, up to the 6th century we showed you, all the Shia scholars are saying Imams don't have Ilmul Ghayb. Allah never gave them Ilmul Ghayb. They have knowledge, but you can't call that knowledge Ilmul Ghayb. So that's what the early scholars are saying, up to the 6th century. Then in the 10th, 11th century, the Safavids, Akhbaris, they come to prominence. The Akhbaris say, no, the Akhbar, we have narrations from the Imams claiming they have Ilmul Ghayb. So we believe that they have Ilmul Ghayb. But those narrations were the inserted, they were the kufr that Imam al-Sadiq had warned you, that the Mughirah ibn Sa'id has inserted into the books of the companions of my father. But the Akhbaris did not take that into account. They said, no, if it's in the books of hadith, we accept it. They built aqidah on it. They made it part of the aqidah. Imams have Ilmul Ghayb, mashallah. They transmitted this to you. Today, you, the Shias in the modern period, you have received your aqidah and your Shiaism from whom? Who is it between you and the Imams? Are the Akhbaris. And the Akhbaris, they transmitted the narrations, they authenticated them, and they transmitted it, and you received it. And now you are wondering to yourself, well, how come this belief of mine, which is derived from the narrations, how come this belief is, reformist scholars are calling it ghulu, they are saying this is, the classical scholars are saying it is kufr. Yeah, it is kufr because Imam al-Sadiq also warned you. He said that what you will find in the books of my father is kufr. Even I accept it is kufr. It is zandaqa, it is blasphemy and heresy. But don't be fooled by it. You go by what the Qur'an is telling you. The Qur'an is very clear. Allah is teaching the Prophet in the Qur'an to say, وَلَا أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبِ, I don't have knowledge of the unseen. So if thousands of narrations come and tell you that no, they have Ilmul Ghayb, dismiss all those narrations. And there are not even thousands of narrations, very few narrations. But the Ghulat promoted them big time. And as a result, it ended up becoming Aqidah. And those people who blindly rely on the narrations, for them this is Aqidah. But for us, this can never be Aqidah because our master and our Imam, Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq alayhi salam, has told us that the Ghulat have inserted kufr and zandaqa into the books of hadith. So if you derive your Aqidah from the books of hadith, you will end up believing in a lot of things that Imam al-Sadiq considered to be kufr and blasphemy and heresy and zandaqa, anti-Islamic, anti-Quranic beliefs. So after the warning from Imam al-Sadiq, it's up to you now. You want to believe in kufr, what Imam al-Sadiq considered kufr? Fine, go ahead and derive your aqidah from the books of hadith. But if you want to have correct aqidah, the aqidah that was approved by Allah, the Messenger, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, then you need to put the Qur'an first, and you need to reject and dismiss all the narrations that go against what Allah has stated in the Qur'an, and what the Prophet and Imams taught in their authentic and real teachings.